The wind should have been the first warning. It howled outside the Ocean View restaurant, rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a 200-foot drop to the rocky Pacific coastline below. But Emma Hayes didn't notice the wind. She was too focused on her husband's smile, the warm, loving expression of a man celebrating 8 years of marriage. What she didn't know was that in exactly 60 seconds, her phone would buzz with a message that would save her life. And in that moment, she would have to make an impossible choice. Trust the mysterious warning, or trust the man sitting across from her. One decision would let her live. The other would make her the fourth victim of a serial killer who had perfected the art of murder. Emma reached for her wine glass, the third of the evening, and took a long sip of the expensive Merlot her husband Marcus had ordered. It was her favorite vintage, a $200 bottle he'd specifically requested. She thought it was romantic. She didn't know it was drugged. Marcus watched her drink with that same warm smile, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of building a life together. 8 years of love, or so she believed. The truth was, Marcus Hayes had been planning this exact moment for 6 months. Every detail had been calculated. Every variable had been controlled. And Emma, trusting and devoted, had walked directly into his trap. Let's go back 15 minutes. Before the text. Before the terror. Before Emma's world shattered into 1,000 pieces. Marcus had chosen this restaurant carefully. The Ocean View sat on a cliff 2 hours from their home in Seattle, isolated and elegant, the kind of place where wealthy couples celebrated milestones. He'd made the reservation 6 months earlier, the same day he'd taken out a $750,000 life insurance policy in Emma's name. The same day he'd forged her signature on the documents. The same day he'd contacted David Hartman, a disbarred private investigator who specialized in making murders look like accidents. Marcus had done this before, 3 times to be exact. And tonight, Emma would become victim number 4. Emma had been so touched when Marcus suggested this romantic dinner. He'd been distant lately, always on his phone, always working late, always too tired for conversation. But tonight, he'd seemed like the man she'd married. Attentive, loving, present. He'd insisted on driving, saying he wanted to take care of everything. He'd bought her a new dress, a designer piece that cost $400, telling her he wanted her to look perfect. He'd even remembered their song, requesting the restaurant play it when they arrived. Emma thought she was seeing the return of the husband she'd fallen in love with. She had no idea she was seeing a performance, a rehearsed, perfected act that Marcus had delivered 3 times before to 3 other women who trusted him completely. As Emma sipped her wine, she felt a slight dizziness beginning to cloud her thoughts. She attributed it to the alcohol, to the romantic atmosphere, to the emotion of the evening. Marcus watched her carefully, noting the way her eyes began to lose focus, the way her movements became slightly less coordinated. The drug was working exactly as planned. In another 10 minutes, she'd be compliant enough to walk to the car without resistance. He'd drive her toward home, taking the coastal route, the one with the sharp curves and the inadequate guardrails. He'd position the car carefully, make sure she was in the driver's seat, unconscious. Then he'd push the Tesla over the cliff, triggering the explosive crash that would destroy any evidence of drugs in her system. The fire would burn hot enough to make identification difficult, necessitating a closed casket. And Marcus would play the devastated widower, collecting his $750,000 payout and moving on to his next target. But then Emma's phone buzzed, a sharp, insistent vibration that cut through the fog beginning to form in her mind. She reached for it automatically, expecting a work email or a spam message. What she saw made her blood run cold. The message was from an unknown number, just 8 words in all capital letters. Get up and go. Don't talk. Your life depends on it. Emma stared at the screen, her wine-dulled mind struggling to process what she was reading. Was this a prank? A wrong number? Some kind of sick joke? She looked up at Marcus, searching his face for any sign that he'd sent it, that this was some elaborate anniversary surprise. But Marcus was smiling at her with that warm, loving expression, completely unaware of the message that had just appeared on her phone. A second text arrived, more urgent than the first. Wine is drugged. Bathroom now. Window. Black SUV waiting. Emma's heart began to pound, adrenaline fighting against the drug already in her system. Her hands started to shake. She looked at her wine glass, then at Marcus, then back at her phone. This couldn't be real. Marcus loved her. They'd been married for 8 years. He worked in medical device sales, made good money, treated her well. Why would anyone send her a message like this? But even as her conscious mind rejected the warning, something deeper, some primal instinct, was screaming at her to listen. She thought about the past few months. The way Marcus had been distant. The way he'd insisted she quit her marketing job to spend more time together. The way he'd convinced her to move away from her sister, the only family she had left. The way he'd slowly, methodically isolated her from everyone she knew. Emma's vision blurred slightly as she stood up, the drug making her movements unsteady. "Bathroom," she managed to say, her voice sounding strange in her own ears. "Feeling dizzy." Marcus's face showed concern, but Emma caught something else in his eyes, something that looked almost like relief. "Take your time, honey," he said, his voice gentle. "I'll be right here." As Emma walked toward the bathroom, fighting to keep her balance, she didn't see Marcus pull out his phone. She didn't see him type a quick message. "She's heading to bathroom now. Get ready." Outside, in the parking lot, a man in a dark sedan started his engine. David Hartman had been waiting for 3 hours, ready to implement Plan B if the drug didn't work as expected. His job was simple. If Emma didn't drink enough wine, if she somehow resisted the drug, he would inject her in the parking lot with a more powerful sedative. Either way, Emma Hayes would not leave this restaurant alive. But Emma never made it back to the table. She stumbled into the bathroom, her ankle turning slightly in her designer heels, and locked the door behind her. The room spun around her, and for a moment, she thought she might pass out. Then her phone buzzed again, the vibration grounding her in reality. "Climb out now. 30 seconds. Emma looked around the bathroom with new eyes. The window, it was open. Not just unlocked, but open. Someone had been here. Someone had prepared an escape route. She heard footsteps approaching the bathroom door, heavy and male. Not the light steps of a waiter. She heard the door handle turn, someone testing to see if it was locked. And in that moment, Emma Hayes made the decision that would save her life. She kicked off her heels, hoisted herself onto the sink, and climbed through the window. The drop was 8 feet onto ornamental bushes below. Emma landed hard, pain shooting through her ankle as it twisted beneath her. Her $400 dress tore on the thorns, leaving scratches across her arms and legs. But she was outside. She was moving. She could hear voices inside the bathroom now, Marcus's voice calling her name with increasing urgency. She dragged herself out of the bushes and looked toward the parking lot. There, exactly as promised, was a black SUV with its lights flashing twice. Emma ran, ignoring the pain in her ankle, ignoring the drug still clouding her mind, ignoring every instinct that told her this was insane. She dove into the SUV just as she saw Marcus burst out of the restaurant's side door, his face twisted in an expression she'd never seen before. Not concern, not love, pure rage. The SUV's tires screeched as it pulled out of the parking lot, and Emma finally allowed herself to look at the driver. The woman was in her 40s, professional-looking, with sharp eyes and an FBI badge clipped to her belt. "My name is Detective Rachel Torres," the woman said, her voice calm despite their speed. "I've been investigating your husband for 14 months. And Emma, I need you to understand something very clearly. The man you married is a serial killer. You were supposed to be his 4th victim tonight." Emma's world tilted. Serial killer. 4th victim. The words didn't make sense. Marcus was a medical device salesman. He went to work every day. He had colleagues, friends, a normal life. How could he be a serial killer? "There's been a mistake," Emma heard herself say. Marcus wouldn't, he couldn't. But Rachel was already pulling up files on a tablet, handing it back to Emma with a grim expression. The first photo showed a woman named Jessica Chin. She was beautiful, brunette, petite. She looked remarkably like Emma. The file said she died in a car accident in 2016, her vehicle going off a cliff on a mountain road and burning. Her husband, Marcus Holt, had collected $500,000 in life insurance. The second photo showed Lisa Ramirez, another brunette, another petite woman who could have been Emma's sister. She drowned during a beach vacation in 2019, despite being a strong swimmer. Her husband, Michael Harris, had collected $600,000. The third photo showed Angela Morrison, and Emma felt her stomach drop. Angela looked so much like her it was uncanny. She died in a hiking fall in 2022, falling from a ravine despite being an experienced hiker. Her husband, Marcus Hayes, Emma's Marcus, had collected $650,000. And then Rachel showed Emma a photo of the three men, Marcus Holt, Michael Harris, Marcus Hayes. They were all the same person. Facial recognition confirmed a 98% match. Your husband's real name is Marcus Anthony Breslin, Rachel said quietly. He's 42 years old, not 38 like he told you. He has a master's degree in psychology, not business. And for the past 10 years he's been marrying women, isolating them, insuring them, and murdering them. You fit his victim profile perfectly. Successful, recently lost a parent, looking for connection, no close family nearby. He chose you, Emma, just like he chose Jessica, Lisa, and Angela before you. Emma stared at the photos, her drugged mind struggling to process what she was seeing. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of believing she was loved. 8 years of trusting a man who had been planning to kill her from the very beginning. She thought about their wedding day, how perfect it had seemed. She thought about the moment he'd proposed, how romantic he'd been. She thought about every "I love you," every kiss, every intimate moment. Had any of it been real, or had she been living with a monster the entire time? The restaurant tonight, Rachel continued, was 2 miles from Highway 7, a road known for fatal accidents. Marcus drugged your wine with a sedative. His plan was to drive you home, position you in the driver's seat while you were unconscious, and push your car over the cliff. It would look like you'd been drinking, lost control, and crashed. The fire would destroy evidence of the drug. You'd be buried in a closed casket, and Marcus would collect the $750,000 life insurance policy he took out in your name 6 months ago. A policy you never signed, Emma. He forged your signature. Emma looked down at her hands, still shaking. How did you know? She asked. How did you know to warn me tonight? Rachel's expression softened slightly. We've been watching Marcus for months, but we didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. The previous deaths were all ruled accidental. We needed to catch him in the act. We tracked his movements, monitored his communications, and when we saw he'd made a reservation at the Ocean View for tonight, the same restaurant where he'd taken Angela Morrison before her death, we knew this was it. We had an agent infiltrate the restaurant staff. She's the one who opened the bathroom window. We had to get you out before Hartman could implement Plan B. Plan B. Emma remembered the man in the dark sedan, the heavy footsteps approaching the bathroom. Who's Hartman? She asked, though part of her didn't want to know. David Hartman is a disbarred private investigator who specializes in staging accidents, Rachel said. He's the one who tampered with Jessica's car brakes. He's the one who drugged Lisa's drink at the beach. He's the one who loosened the safety cables on Angela's hiking trail. And tonight, he was in that parking lot with a syringe, ready to inject you if the wine didn't work. Marcus pays him $50,000 per victim. We have wire transfers, communications, everything. But we need more. We need Marcus to confess. And that's where you come in. Emma looked at Rachel with exhaustion and horror warring in her expression. What do you mean? She asked, though she already knew. Rachel pulled up another file, this one showing a closed casket at a funeral. We're going to fake your death, she said. We're going to make Marcus think his plan worked. And then we're going to catch him when he files the insurance claim and tries to collect on your murder. The next 3 hours passed in a blur. Rachel drove Emma to a safe house, where FBI agents examined her, drew blood to document the drug in her system, and began the process of staging her death. They needed to create a car accident scene that would be convincing enough to fool Marcus and his accomplice. Emma sat in the safe house, wrapped in a blanket, watching through monitors as FBI technicians positioned her car, Marcus's Tesla that she'd driven to work that morning, at the edge of the cliff on Highway 7. They created skid marks. They damaged the guardrail. And then, using controlled explosives, they pushed the car over the edge. Emma watched her vehicle tumble 200 feet down to the rocky shore below, watched it explode on impact, watched the flames consume everything. Felt like watching her own death. In a way, it was. Emma Hayes, the trusting wife who'd believed in love and marriage, died in that fire. What emerged would be something different entirely. At 2:14 in the morning, Seattle police officers knocked on Marcus's door. Emma watched through surveillance footage as he answered, wearing pajamas, his face confused and sleepy. "Mr. Hayes? I'm Officer Davidson. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. There's been an accident." Emma watched her husband's face transform. First shock, then denial, then a collapse that looked completely genuine. He fell to his knees, sobbing, asking if she was okay, if she was in the hospital, if he could see her. The officers helped him to a chair, explained that Emma's car had gone off Highway 7, that the fire had been catastrophic, that she hadn't survived. Marcus's performance was Oscar-worthy. He cried. He shook. He asked why she'd been on that road, why she'd been driving after drinking. He blamed himself for not driving her home from dinner. Every word, every gesture, every tear was exactly what a devastated husband would do. But the surveillance cameras Rachel had installed in Marcus's house captured what happened after the officers left. Marcus sat in his chair for exactly 10 minutes, head in his hands, the picture of grief. Then he stood up, walked to his phone, and smiled. It was a cold smile, a satisfied smile, the expression of someone whose plan had succeeded. He made a call, and Emma heard his voice through the FBI's wiretap. "It's done. She's gone. The police just left. Everything went perfectly." On the other end of the line, David Hartman's voice responded, "You're sure? No complications." Marcus laughed, a sound that made Emma's skin crawl. "She died exactly as planned. Car fire destroyed the evidence. They'll rule it an accident. I'll have the insurance money within 60 days. He hung up and immediately called someone else. A woman answered, and Emma's heart sank as she recognized the voice. Rebecca Torres, a woman Marcus had introduced as a friend from work months ago. "Baby, it's over," Marcus said, his voice warm and loving. "She's gone. We can finally be together, just like we planned." Rebecca's excited response cut through Emma like a knife. "Really? Oh God, Marcus, I've been so scared. When can I see you?" Marcus's reply was casual, almost bored. "Give it a few days. I need to play the grieving husband. But soon, baby. Soon we'll have everything we wanted." Emma turned off the monitor, unable to watch anymore. Rachel sat beside her, silent, giving her space to process. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice hard and cold. He was already planning his next victim, Rebecca. She has no idea she's wife number 5. Rachel nodded. "We've been watching her too. She matches his profile. Brunette, petite, professional, recently divorced, no close family. Marcus met her at a grief support group 3 months ago. He's been grooming her while planning your death." Emma felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just anger or betrayal or pain. It was a cold, calculated determination. For 8 years, she'd let Marcus control her life. He'd convinced her to quit her job. He'd isolated her from her sister. He'd made every major decision. She thought it was love. She thought he was protecting her, taking care of her, building a life with her. But he'd been grooming her for murder. And Emma decided in that moment that Marcus Hayes would pay for every lie, every manipulation, every moment of false affection. He'd tried to kill her, but he'd failed. And now she would destroy him completely. The funeral was held 5 days later. Emma watched from an FBI surveillance van parked 3 blocks away, cameras focused on the cemetery where her empty casket was being lowered into the ground. 47 people attended, most of them Marcus's colleagues and acquaintances. Emma's sister Sarah had flown in from Boston, sobbing uncontrollably as she said goodbye to a sister who wasn't actually dead. Emma's heart broke watching Sarah's grief, knowing she couldn't reveal the truth yet. It wasn't safe. Not until Marcus was behind bars. Marcus stood by the casket in a perfectly tailored black suit, accepting condolences with practiced sorrow. He'd written a eulogy that made Emma sick to listen to, talking about their love, their dreams, their plans for the future. He even choked up when mentioning how they'd been trying for a baby, a complete lie that made the mourners cry harder. Emma had wanted children desperately. Marcus had always found excuses to delay, saying they should wait until his career was more stable, until they had more savings, until the timing was right. Now she understood why. Children would have complicated his murder plan. After the service, surveillance followed Marcus to a bar across town. He sat alone for an hour, drinking and checking his phone. Then Rebecca arrived. Emma watched as her husband, her supposedly grieving, devastated husband, smiled when he saw Rebecca. They toasted with champagne. They laughed. They left together, heading to a hotel where Marcus had apparently been maintaining a secret room for months. The surveillance footage showed them kissing in the elevator, Marcus's hands already pulling at Rebecca's clothes. This man, who'd buried his wife 5 hours ago, was celebrating her death with his mistress. Emma turned to Rachel with eyes that held no tears, only cold determination. "I want him destroyed," she said quietly. "Not just arrested. Destroyed. I want him to lose everything, his freedom, his money, his future, his sanity. I want him to suffer the way he made Jessica, Lisa, and Angela suffer." Rachel studied Emma for a long moment. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. And Emma smiled, a smile that Marcus would have recognized if he'd been there to see it. It was the same cold, calculated smile he'd worn after the police left his house. "I'm proposing we don't just catch him filing an insurance claim," Emma said. "I'm proposing we make him think he's won, make him think he's safe, and then destroy him from the inside." Over the next 2 weeks, Emma underwent a transformation that was both physical and psychological. FBI specialists changed her appearance. Her brown hair became platinum blonde, cut in long layers that completely altered her face shape. Colored contacts turned her brown eyes blue. A professional wardrobe replaced her practical clothes with elegant, sophisticated pieces. A voice coach taught her to speak with a lower register, more confidence, a completely different vocal pattern. But the most important transformation was internal. Emma studied Marcus's psychology, his patterns, his preferences. She learned to read micro-expressions, to spot manipulation tactics, to understand the mind of a predator. And she created a new identity, Victoria Mason, a 36-year-old grief counselor whose husband had died 3 years ago in a car accident. The parallels to Emma's situation were intentional. Marcus would be drawn to Victoria the same way he'd been drawn to Emma, to Jessica, to Lisa, to Angela. He had a type, and Victoria was exactly that type. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Victoria would attend the same grief support group where Marcus had been performing his widower act for 3 weeks. She would be everything Marcus looked for in a victim. Beautiful, vulnerable, professional, isolated, financially stable. She would let him approach her, let him think he was seducing her, let him believe he'd found wife number 5. But every word, every gesture, every meeting would be recorded. FBI surveillance would track his every move. And when Marcus felt comfortable enough to reveal his plans, when he confessed to Victoria about his relief over Emma's death, when he started researching insurance policies and meeting with Hartman to plan the next murder, that's when they would arrest him. Not just for insurance fraud, but for 4 attempted murders and 3 successful ones. The evidence would be overwhelming. Marcus Anthony Breslin would spend the rest of his life in prison. On day 14 of Emma's new life as Victoria Mason, she walked into the Evergreen Community Grief Support Center. The room was a church basement with fluorescent lights and a circle of metal folding chairs. 12 people sat scattered around the circle, each one carrying their own burden of loss. And then Marcus entered. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs, but Victoria's face remained calm, sympathetic, mildly curious. She'd practiced this moment 100 times, prepared for every possible reaction. But seeing him again, seeing the man who tried to murder her, who'd celebrated her death, who'd moved on so quickly to his next victim, it took every ounce of control not to scream, not to attack, not to reveal herself. Marcus looked thinner than he had 2 weeks ago, his face carefully arranged in an expression of grief. He wore his wedding ring still, Emma noticed, a prop to make him seem like a devoted husband who couldn't let go. The group facilitator invited Marcus to introduce himself. "My name is Marcus," he said, his voice breaking at exactly the right moment. "My wife Emma died 3 weeks ago in a car accident. I'm still trying to process it." The group murmured sympathetically. Marcus continued, describing the guilt he felt, wishing he'd driven Emma home that night, wishing he could have saved her. His performance was flawless. If Emma hadn't known the truth, she would have believed every word. When it was Victoria's turn to introduce herself, Emma channeled years of suppressed emotion into her cover story. "I'm Victoria," she said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "My husband James died 3 years ago, also a car accident. It gets easier slowly, but some days are still hard." She saw Marcus's eyes lock onto her immediately, saw the way he studied her face, her body, her hands, saw him cataloging every detail, deciding if she fit his profile. And she saw the moment he made his decision. Victoria Mason would be wife number 5. After the meeting, Marcus approached Victoria with a humble, vulnerable expression. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. "It helps, doesn't it? Talking to people who understand." Victoria smiled sadly. "It does. No one else really gets it unless they've been through it." They talked for 20 minutes, standing in the church basement while other group members filtered out. Marcus was charming, attentive, asking thoughtful questions about Victoria's grief, her life, her husband. Emma recognized every tactic. He was gathering information, looking for vulnerabilities, determining how to hook her. When he finally asked for her number, suggesting they get coffee sometime, Victoria hesitated just long enough to seem genuine before agreeing. "I'd like that," she said. "Here's my number." Marcus's smile was warm and genuine looking as he saved her contact information. But Emma knew that smile. She'd seen it 1,000 times during their marriage. It was the smile of a predator who'd just found his next meal. 3 days later, Marcus texted Victoria, "There's a place I'd like to take you. Quiet, beautiful view. Good for conversation." He sent the address, and Emma's blood ran cold when she saw it. The ocean view. The same restaurant where he'd tried to murder her 3 weeks ago. He was taking Victoria to the scene of the crime. Rachel wanted to abort the mission, call it too dangerous, but Emma insisted. "He thinks he's being romantic," she explained. "Sharing a place that's meaningful to him. He has no idea how sick that actually is. We have to let him do this. It's part of his pattern." So Victoria Mason walked into the Ocean View restaurant on a Thursday evening, wearing an elegant dress and carrying a wire in her necklace that would record everything Marcus said. Emma forced herself to sit at the same table where she'd sat 3 weeks earlier, ordered water instead of wine, claiming she was in recovery, and listened as Marcus told her lies about his marriage, about Emma, about his grief. "We were trying for a baby," Marcus said, his voice heavy with false emotion. "She was so excited about it. I wish I'd told her I loved her more often. I took her for granted." Every word was a knife in Emma's heart, but Victoria's face showed only sympathy. "I understand," she said softly. "We always think we have more time." Marcus reached across the table, taking Victoria's hand. "The insurance company has been difficult," he said, testing the waters. "They're investigating like I'm some kind of suspect. It's insulting. I lost my wife, and they're treating me like a criminal." Victoria squeezed his hand. "That must be so painful, adding insult to injury." She paused, then added carefully, "How much? I mean, if you don't mind me asking." Marcus took the bait. "750,000, he said. "We'd taken out policies on each other for protection. But now they're acting like I'm trying to commit fraud. Like I'd ever." He trailed off, playing the offended victim perfectly. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria and Marcus went on 4 more dates. Each one was recorded, each conversation documented. Marcus love-bombed Victoria with flowers, compliments, attention. He suggested they were meant to find each other, that their shared grief had brought them together for a reason. He talked about moving forward, about second chances, about how life was too short to waste time. On their 3rd date, he invited Victoria to his house, the house Emma had lived in for 8 years. Walking through that door again, seeing her home completely erased as if she'd never existed, was one of the hardest things Emma had ever done. All her belongings were gone. Rebecca's things had replaced them. Photos of Emma had been removed from the walls. It was like 8 years of her life had been deleted in 3 weeks. Marcus gave Victoria a tour, pointing out features of the house with pride. "I'm thinking of selling," he said. "Too many memories here. I'd like to start fresh somewhere new. Maybe you and I could. It's probably too soon to talk about this, but I feel such a connection with you, Victoria." On their 5th date, Marcus showed Victoria photos of Emma on his phone. This was the moment Emma had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. She had to look at pictures of herself, at her own face, and pretend to be a stranger. "This was my wife Emma," Marcus said, his voice tender. "She was beautiful, wasn't she?" Victoria studied the photos with what looked like polite interest. "She was lovely," she said. "You must miss her terribly." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said something that made Emma's hands clench beneath the table. "You remind me of her," he said softly. "The way you move, the way you smile. Maybe that's why I'm so drawn to you." It was a confession and a threat. He was attracted to Victoria because she looked like Emma, because she fit his victim profile, because in his mind, she was already the next woman he would marry, insure, and murder. And he had no idea he was confessing all of this to the woman he'd tried to kill. On their 6th date, Marcus's mask began to slip. They were at his house again, and he'd been drinking more than usual. The insurance company had been asking questions, and Emma knew from FBI surveillance that they were suspicious of the accident's circumstances. Marcus was getting nervous. "Can I tell you something?" he asked Victoria, his voice slightly slurred. "Something I haven't told anyone?" Victoria's heart raced, but her voice was steady. "Of course, you can tell me anything." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I feel guilty about Emma's death, but not for the reasons you'd think." He paused, taking another drink. "I'm relieved." "Is that terrible?" "I'm relieved she's gone." Victoria kept her expression neutral, sympathetic. "Grief is complicated," she said. "Relief doesn't mean you didn't love her." Marcus shook his head. "No, you don't understand. We weren't happy. Not for years. She was suffocating me, always wanting more time, more attention, more promises about the future. The insurance money means I can finally start fresh, with someone who understands me, someone like you." Emma wanted to scream, to attack, to reveal herself. But Victoria just nodded sympathetically, encouraging Marcus to continue. "Sometimes I think," he said slowly, "if things had been different that night, if I'd been the one driving instead." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. He was confessing, in his own way, to being responsible for Emma's death. Before Victoria could push further, Marcus's phone rang. He checked it, and his expression changed instantly. All the vulnerability disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. "I need to take this," he said, stepping outside. Victoria stayed in the living room, and that's when she saw it. Marcus's laptop was open on the coffee table, an email visible on the screen. It was from David Hartman. Subject line, "We need to talk. Now." The body of the email read, "Someone's asking questions. FBI contacted me about wire transfers. Need to meet. Clean this up before it gets worse." Emma's blood froze. Hartman was talking. The plan was compromised. Marcus might know about the investigation. When Marcus returned, his entire demeanor had changed. The warm, vulnerable widower was gone, replaced by someone cold and guarded. "I need to go," he said abruptly. "Work emergency." He kissed Victoria's cheek, and Emma had to fight not to recoil from his touch. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised. But as soon as he left, Rachel's voice came through Emma's earpiece. "Hartman reached out to us. He's scared Marcus will kill him to cover tracks. Wants immunity deal. We're moving up the timeline. Tomorrow we arrest Marcus. Operation ends tomorrow night." Emma sat alone in Marcus's house, her house, and felt the weight of everything crushing down on her. 8 years of lies. 3 dead women. 1 almost dead woman who'd been lucky enough to get a warning text. And tomorrow it would all end. Marcus would be arrested, charged, tried, and convicted. Justice would be served. But it wouldn't bring back Jessica, Lisa, or Angela. It wouldn't give Emma back the 8 years she'd lost trusting a monster. The final confrontation happened at 3:47 in the morning. FBI intelligence indicated Marcus was planning to eliminate Hartman and flee to Costa Rica, where he'd already purchased property. Rachel mobilized a SWAT team to arrest Marcus at his house, with Hartman wearing a wire to gather final confession evidence. Emma, against Rachel's orders, insisted on being there. "You brought me into this," she said. "Let me see it through." So Emma sat in the surveillance van, watching monitors as Hartman approached Marcus's front door. She watched Marcus let him inside, watched them move to the living room, watched as Marcus said the words that would seal his fate. "So, David, how long have you been working with the FBI?" Hartman tried to deny it, but Marcus pulled out photos of FBI surveillance, of Hartman meeting with Rachel, of the whole operation. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Marcus asked, his voice cold. "I've done this 4 times. I know how to spot an investigation." Emma's hands clenched as she watched Marcus stand, walk to a drawer, and pull out a gun. "The question is," Marcus said calmly, "what do we do now?" Hartman was stammering, trying to negotiate, trying to save himself. Marcus just laughed. "You're trying to save yourself. I respect that. But you miscalculated, David. I've been planning my exit for months. The insurance money transfers tomorrow. I have a flight to Costa Rica at 6 a.m., and I need to tie up loose ends." He pointed the gun at Hartman. Rachel gave the order, "Go, go, go." SWAT team breached the doors, flooding into the house with weapons drawn. Emma, against every order and every protocol, ran from the van toward the house. She could hear shouting, could hear chaos, could hear gunfire. One shot. Marcus had fired at SWAT, missed, and was running through the house. Emma knew this house, knew every room, every corner, every hiding place. She knew Marcus was heading for the master bedroom, where he kept a go bag and another weapon. She reached the bedroom door just as Marcus grabbed his bag. They saw each other at the same moment. For 5 eternal seconds, they just stared. Emma could see the exact moment recognition hit Marcus. His face went from confusion to shock to horror. "Emma," he whispered, "but you're dead. I saw the car, the fire, the funeral." Emma stepped forward, Victoria's blonde wig gone, brown contacts back in, her real voice replacing the coach tone. "You saw what I wanted you to see," she said. "Did you really think pushing me out of our life would be that easy?" Marcus's gun wavered in his hand. "This isn't possible. You died. I planned everything perfectly." Emma felt a cold satisfaction watching him break. "You didn't plan for me surviving," she said. "You didn't plan for me fighting back. Jessica, Lisa, Angela, they trusted you until the end. But I stopped trusting you the moment that text came through." She took another step closer. "You made one mistake, Marcus. You thought I was like them. Weak, disposable, easy to erase." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But I'm not dead. I'm the ghost you created. And I've been destroying you piece by piece." Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. "Victoria," he breathed. "That was you. All of it." Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. "Victoria," he breathed. "That was you. All of it. The support group. The dates. You were gathering evidence." He laughed. A broken, bitter sound. "I thought I recognized something in your eyes. I told myself I was being paranoid. But it was you. My dead wife, sitting across from me, and I couldn't see it." Emma felt power surge through her, the power of a victim who'd become a survivor, then something more dangerous. "Every word you said, I recorded," she told him. "Every confession, every lie, every plan. The FBI has everything now. The insurance fraud, the forged policies, Hartman's testimony about Jessica, Lisa, and Angela." She pulled out her phone, pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the room. "I'm relieved she's gone. We weren't happy. She was suffocating me. The insurance money means I can start fresh." Marcus's face twisted with rage. "You manipulative bitch," he snarled, all pretense of charm evaporating. "You think you've won? You think you're so smart?" He raised the gun, pointing it directly at Emma's chest. "If I'm going down, you're coming with me. For real this time." But Emma didn't flinch. She'd spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, and she knew Marcus better than he knew himself. She saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw his eyes lock onto her with murderous intent. And she moved. 8 years of watching him, learning his patterns, reading his micro-expressions, it all came down to this split second. Emma Dove left just as the gun fired, the bullet embedding itself in the wall where she'd stood a moment before. SWAT team flooded the room, weapons trained on Marcus. "Drop the weapon. Drop it now." Marcus swung the gun toward them, and they had no choice. 2 shots rang out, controlled and precise, hitting Marcus in the shoulder. He fell to his knees, the gun clattering across the floor. SWAT officers swarmed him, forcing him down, securing his hands with zip ties. Marcus was screaming, a stream of threats and curses and desperate denials. "This isn't over. You're still my wife. That's fraud. Bigamy. She faked her death." Rachel burst into the room, saw Emma standing unharmed, and her face flooded with relief and fury in equal measure. "Are you insane? You could have been killed. You were supposed to stay in the van." But Emma barely heard her. She was walking toward Marcus, kneeling down to his level as SWAT officers held him. She whispered, so quietly that only he could hear, "I divorced you last week. Filed under Emma Catherine Hayes, deceased. Legal loophole. Dead people can dissolve marriages from beyond the grave with proper documentation and evidence of fraud. You're not my husband anymore, Marcus. You're just a murderer who failed." Marcus's eyes widened with the final realization that he'd lost everything. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be happening." Emma stood, her voice loud enough now for everyone to hear. "You tried to kill me for money. You killed 3 other women. You destroyed lives, families, futures. And now you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, knowing that your 4th victim was the one who destroyed you." As SWAT officers dragged Marcus Hayes out of the bedroom, he was still screaming, still denying, still trying to convince anyone who would listen that Emma had framed him, that she was the criminal, that none of this was his fault. But the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had recordings of every conversation with Victoria. They had Hartman's testimony about all 4 murders. They had financial records showing the insurance policies, the forged signatures, the wire transfers. They had the drug from Emma's blood test the night of the attempted murder. They had Marcus's own confession, recorded on FBI surveillance, admitting he was relieved by Emma's death and planned to use the insurance money to start fresh. There was no escape, no legal loophole, no technicality that could save him. Marcus Anthony Breslin would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Emma watched him being loaded into a police vehicle, and she felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years. Free. Not happy, not vindicated, not even satisfied. Just free. The weight of Marcus's control, his manipulation, his lies. It lifted from her shoulders like she'd been carrying a physical burden she could finally set down. 2 weeks later, Emma sat in a federal courthouse watching as formal charges were read against Marcus Anthony Breslin. 3 counts of first-degree murder for Jessica Chun, Lisa Ramirez, and Angela Morrison. 1 count of attempted murder for Emma Hayes. Multiple counts of insurance fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. David Hartman sat at the prosecution table, having agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence of 15 years instead of life. He walked the court through every detail of how he'd helped Marcus stage 3 murders. Jessica's car brakes had been tampered with, making the crash look like mechanical failure. Lisa had been given a powerful sedative at the beach, making her drowning look like a tragic accident. Angela's hiking trail safety cables had been loosened, turning a simple fall into a fatal plunge. And Emma's wine had been drugged, with plans to stage her death as a drunk driving accident. Hartman's testimony was detailed, damning, and irrefutable. He provided receipts, communications, photographs. He had kept evidence as insurance against Marcus turning on him, which had ultimately saved his own life and sealed Marcus's fate. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Marcus's defense team tried everything. They claimed Hartman was lying to save himself. They suggested Emma had orchestrated everything out of revenge for an affair. They attempted to paint Marcus as a successful businessman targeted by a vindictive wife and an overzealous FBI. But the evidence was simply too strong. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd seen countless cases of domestic violence and murder, showed no mercy during sentencing. "Mr. Breslin," she said, her voice cold and clear, "you are a predator of the worst kind. You used charm and manipulation to gain these women's trust, then murdered them for financial gain. You showed no remorse, no humanity, no conscience. This court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 90 years for the additional charges. You will never be free again." Marcus's face went white. "This isn't justice," he shouted as bailiffs moved to restrain him. "She framed me. Emma framed me. I'm innocent." But no one was listening. He was dragged from the courtroom, still screaming, still denying, still refusing to accept responsibility for what he'd done. Emma sat in the gallery, watching Marcus disappear through the courthouse doors for the last time. Sarah, her sister, sat beside her, holding her hand. Rachel Torres sat on her other side, the FBI detective who'd saved Emma's life and helped her get justice. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked quietly. Emma thought about that question for a long moment. How did she feel? Not victorious, 3 women were still dead. Not healed, 8 years of trauma couldn't be erased by a verdict. Not even satisfied, no punishment could give back what Marcus had stolen. "I feel," Emma said finally, "like I can breathe again, like I'm not looking over my shoulder anymore. Like maybe, eventually, I'll figure out who I am without him." Rachel squeezed her shoulder. "That's a good start," she said. Over the following weeks, Emma began the slow process of rebuilding her life. She legally changed her name to Emma Victoria Hayes, combining both identities, the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. She used the FBI reward money from the case, combined with a settlement from the insurance companies Marcus had defrauded, to start a non-profit organization called Phoenix House, dedicated to helping women escape domestic violence and abusive relationships. Phoenix House provided resources that Emma wished she'd had: legal assistance, identity change services, safe houses, financial support, and psychological counseling. Emma hired Rachel Torres as the organization's security consultant, using her FBI experience to keep clients safe from abusive partners. The organization's first client was Rebecca Torres, the woman Marcus had been grooming as wife number 5. When FBI agents informed Rebecca that the man she'd been dating was a serial killer who'd planned to murder her for insurance money, she'd suffered a complete breakdown. Emma reached out to her personally, met with her in a quiet coffee shop, and told her the truth. "I know exactly how you feel," Emma said. "I know what it's like to realize the person you trusted was planning to kill you. I know the shame, the anger, the confusion. And I want you to know, it wasn't your fault. He was good at this. He'd been perfecting his technique for 10 years. You couldn't have known." Rebecca, tears streaming down her face, asked the question that haunted all of Marcus's victims. "How did I not see it? How did I miss all the signs?" Emma reached across the table, taking Rebecca's hand. "Because he's a master manipulator. Because he studied psychology and learned exactly how to exploit trust and vulnerability. Because we wanted to believe in love, in partnership, in happily ever after. And he used that hope against us." 6 months after Marcus's conviction, Emma stood in front of a crowd of 50 people at the grand opening of Phoenix House. Survivors of domestic violence, supporters, donors, and media representatives filled the room. Emma had been nervous about speaking publicly, about sharing her story, but Rachel had encouraged her. "Your voice matters," Rachel had said. "Your survival matters. And there are women out there right now who need to hear that they can escape, they can fight back, they can win." So Emma stood at the podium, looked out at the faces watching her, and began to speak. "My name is Emma Victoria Hayes," she said, her voice steady and strong. "6 months ago, I was supposed to die. My husband drugged my wine at a romantic anniversary dinner, planning to stage my death as a car accident so he could collect $750,000 in life insurance. I was his 4th intended victim. 3 other women weren't as lucky as I was. Jessica Chin, Lisa Ramirez, and Angela Morrison died because they trusted a man who saw them as nothing more than financial opportunities." Emma paused, looking at a photograph she'd placed on the podium, pictures of Jessica, Lisa, and Angela that she'd obtained from their families. "I survived because someone warned me, because the FBI had been investigating my husband and saved my life at the last possible moment. But most women in abusive relationships don't get a warning text. They don't have FBI agents watching over them. They're isolated, controlled, and trapped by partners who use love as a weapon." She took a breath, feeling the emotion rise in her chest. Phoenix House exists for them, for the women who are scared to leave because they have nowhere to go, for the women who've been told they're worthless, that no one will believe them, that they deserve the abuse, for the women who see the red flags but have been manipulated into ignoring them. We offer resources, safety, legal assistance, and something equally important, proof that you can survive, that you can escape, that you can build a new life. The applause was thunderous, but Emma barely heard it. She was looking at a woman in the back row, crying silently, who'd approached Phoenix House's intake coordinator after the event. The woman's story was heartbreakingly familiar. Controlling husband, isolation from family, unexplained financial changes, a recent life insurance policy she didn't remember signing. Emma spent an hour with that woman, listening to her story, recognizing every tactic, every manipulation, every warning sign. "You're not crazy," Emma told her. "You're not overreacting. Your instincts are telling you something is wrong because something is wrong. And we're going to help you." Within a week, Phoenix House had helped the woman leave her husband, file for divorce, alert authorities to the suspicious insurance policy, and start rebuilding her life in a safe location. It was the first of many similar cases. Word spread quickly about the organization run by a woman who'd faked her death to escape a serial killer. Media outlets requested interviews. Emma declined most of them, but she agreed to one, a documentary about Marcus's crimes and the women he'd victimized. She insisted the focus be on Jessica, Lisa, and Angela, not on her own survival. They deserve to be remembered, Emma told the filmmakers. Not as statistics or victims, but as real women with lives and dreams and families who loved them. Marcus tried to erase them. I won't let him succeed. The documentary aired 9 months after Marcus's conviction, and the response was overwhelming. Thousands of women reached out, sharing their own stories of manipulation, control, and abuse. Many had recognized warning signs in their own relationships. Some had successfully escaped. Others were still trapped, looking for help. Phoenix House's resources were stretched thin, but Emma hired more counselors, more lawyers, more security experts. She expanded the organization to multiple cities, creating a network of safe houses and support services. She became a voice for survivors, speaking at conferences and universities about the psychology of abusive relationships and the warning signs of potentially dangerous partners. And through it all, she rebuilt her own life. She reconnected with her sister Sarah, spending holidays together and slowly healing the relationship that Marcus had tried to destroy. She returned to therapy, working through 8 years of trauma and manipulation. She even eventually started dating again, though she was careful, cautious, armed with knowledge about red flags and manipulation tactics that she'd learned the hardest way possible. 1 year after Marcus's conviction, Emma received a letter. It was from Jessica Chen's mother, a woman who'd spent years believing her daughter's death was a tragic accident. "Thank you," the letter read, "for giving me the truth. For 8 years, I've blamed myself for not being there when Jessica needed me. I thought maybe if I'd called her that day, if I'd visited more often, if I'd been a better mother, somehow she'd still be alive. But you've shown me that this wasn't an accident. This was murder. And it wasn't my fault, just like it wasn't Jessica's fault, just like it wasn't your fault. Marcus Breslin is where he belongs. And because of you, other women will be saved. My daughter's death wasn't in vain. Thank you for making sure of that." Emma read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This was why she'd started Phoenix House. This was why she'd chosen to be public about her story instead of disappearing into witness protection with a new identity. Because silence protected predators. Because shame kept victims isolated. Because the only way to break the cycle was to shine light into the darkness and say, "This happened, this was real, and it will not be forgotten." 2 years after Marcus's conviction, Emma visited him in prison. It was something she'd debated for months, discussing it endlessly with her therapist and Rachel. "You don't owe him anything," Rachel had said. "You don't need closure from him. You've already won." But Emma needed to see him one final time. Needed to look him in the eye as the woman she'd become, not the woman he'd tried to destroy. The visiting room at Riverside Maximum Security Prison was bleak and cold, with scarred tables and guards watching every interaction. Marcus was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, looking years older than the last time Emma had seen him. Prison had not been kind to him. He'd lost weight, his face was gaunt, and his eyes held a hollowness that came from years of confinement with no hope of release. When he saw Emma, a flash of emotion crossed his face. Anger, regret, something Emma couldn't quite identify. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice flat. Emma sat down across from him, and for a moment, she just looked at him. This man had controlled 8 years of her life, had planned her murder with cold calculation, had killed 3 other women without remorse. And now he was nothing, just a prisoner with a number, forgotten by everyone except the families he'd destroyed. "I came to tell you something," Emma said quietly. "I came to tell you that you failed. You tried to erase me, and instead, you created something you never could have imagined." Phoenix House has helped over 200 women escape abusive relationships in the past 2 years. 200 women who might have become statistics, who might have ended up like Jessica, Lisa, and Angela. But they're alive because I survived. Because I fought back. Because I refused to let you win. Marcus's jaw clenched. "You ruined my life," he said. "I had everything planned perfectly. I would have been in Costa Rica by now, living in paradise, free and wealthy. Instead, I'm in here because of you." Emma leaned forward, her voice hard and cold. "No, Marcus. You're in here because you murdered 3 women and tried to murder a 4th. You're in here because you chose to see other human beings as nothing more than sources of money. You're in here because of your choices, your actions, your crimes. I didn't ruin your life. You did." She stood up, ready to leave. "I just wanted you to know, I won. I built a life beyond anything I could have imagined when I was married to you. I help people. I make a difference. I matter. And you? You're just a cautionary tale. A warning to other women about the dangers of ignoring red flags and trusting too quickly." Marcus stared at her with undisguised hatred. "I hope you're happy," he spat. "I hope you feel proud of yourself." Emma smiled, and it was genuine. "I am," she said. "For the first time in years, I actually am." She turned and walked toward the exit, feeling Marcus's eyes on her back. She heard him call out, "Emma, Emma, wait." But she didn't turn around, didn't look back, didn't give him one more second of her time or attention. She walked out of that prison and into the sunshine, feeling lighter than she had in years. That was the last time Emma Victoria Hayes ever saw Marcus Anthony Breslin. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, a cautionary tale about narcissism, manipulation, and murder. And Emma would spend the rest of her life free, building something positive from the ashes of her near-death experience. 3 years after Marcus's conviction, Phoenix House had expanded to 12 cities across the country. Emma had written a book about her experience, donating all proceeds to domestic violence prevention programs. She'd been invited to speak at the United Nations about intimate partner violence and the psychology of abusive relationships. And she'd started a new program, training law enforcement and medical professionals to recognize the warning signs of domestic abuse before it escalated to murder. But the work that meant the most to Emma was still the one-on-one conversations with women who walked through Phoenix House's doors. Women like the one sitting across from her now, a 32-year-old teacher named Michelle who'd found out her husband had taken out a life insurance policy without her knowledge. "I feel crazy," Michelle said, tears streaming down her face. "Everyone tells me I'm overreacting, that he's just being financially responsible, that I should trust my husband. But something feels wrong, and I can't shake it." Emma reached across the desk, taking Michelle's hand. "You're not crazy," she said firmly. "You're listening to your instincts, and your instincts are trying to protect you. Let's look at the facts together." They spent 2 hours going through Michelle's relationship, identifying patterns of control and manipulation that Michelle had normalized over the years. The way her husband had convinced her to quit her high-paying corporate job to become a teacher because it was less stressful. The way he'd suggested they move away from her family for a fresh start. The way he'd taken control of their finances, giving Michelle an allowance from her own earnings. The way he discouraged her friendships, claiming he wanted more quality time together. Every single tactic was one Emma recognized. She'd lived it herself. "Here's what we're going to do," Emma said. "First, we're going to get copies of all your financial documents, including that insurance policy. Second, we're going to consult with a lawyer about your options. Third, we're going to create a safety plan, a way for you to leave quickly if you decide that's necessary. And fourth, we're going to make sure you have support, resources, and people who believe you." Michelle looked at Emma with desperate hope. "You really think I'm in danger?" she asked. Emma chose her words carefully. "I think your husband is showing behaviors that are consistent with financial abuse and control. I think an unauthorized life insurance policy is a serious red flag. I think you deserve to feel safe in your own marriage, and right now you don't. Whether that danger is immediate or future, I can't say. But I can say this, every woman I've worked with who had these instincts, who felt something was wrong but couldn't prove it, they were right. Every single time." 6 months later, Emma received a text from Michelle. "You were right. He'd been planning to stage a boating accident. Police found evidence when they investigated the insurance policy. He's been arrested. I'm safe now. Thank you for believing me when no one else would." It was messages like that that kept Emma going, even on the hard days when the work felt overwhelming, when the stories of abuse and manipulation felt endless, when she wondered if she was making any real difference. 5 years after Marcus's conviction, Emma stood at a cemetery she'd visited many times before. The graves of Jessica Chin, Lisa Ramirez, and Angela Morrison were side by side now. Emma had worked with their families to have them moved, creating a small memorial garden where loved ones could visit and remember. Emma placed flowers on each grave, as she did every year on the anniversary of Marcus's arrest. "I hope you're at peace," she said softly, addressing the 3 women whose deaths had led to her survival. "I hope you know that your stories mattered, that you mattered, that you're not forgotten." She thought about the women she'd helped through Phoenix House, the lives that had been saved, the abusive relationships that had been escaped. She thought about the legislation that had been passed in 3 states requiring background checks before life insurance policies could be taken out on spouses. She thought about the training programs that were now teaching medical professionals and law enforcement to recognize patterns of financial abuse. She thought about the documentary that had been watched by millions, raising awareness about the dangers of intimate partner violence. And she thought about herself, Emma Victoria Hayes, survivor, advocate, fighter. The woman who'd fallen from grace and found strength. The woman who'd been targeted for murder and lived to tell the tale. The woman who'd transformed trauma into purpose and pain into power. As Emma walked away from the cemetery that day, her phone buzzed. Another woman needing help. Another story of control and manipulation. Another opportunity to make a difference. Emma smiled, unlocked her phone, and typed her response. I can help. Meet me at Phoenix House tomorrow. Bring documentation of the insurance policy and any financial records you have access to. You're not alone anymore. Because that was the truth Emma had learned. The truth she shared with every woman who walked through her doors. You're never as alone as abusive partners want you to believe. There's always help available. There's always a way out. There's always hope. And sometimes, the falls that are meant to destroy you end up being exactly what you need to discover who you really are. Emma had been pushed from a metaphorical helicopter 8 years ago, manipulated and controlled by a man who saw her as nothing more than a profitable target. But she'd survived the fall. She'd learned to fly. And now, she spent her days teaching other women that they could fly too. That they could escape. That they could build lives beyond their abuser's control. That they could transform from victims into survivors into something even more powerful. Warriors for their own freedom and the freedom of others. Marcus Anthony Breslin would spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. His legacy nothing more than a warning about the dangers of narcissism and greed. But Emma Victoria Hayes's legacy was still being written. Every woman she helped. Every life she saved. Every family she kept intact by intervening before tragedy struck. That was her legacy. That was her purpose. That was why she'd survived when Jessica, Lisa, and Angela hadn't. Not because she was better or stronger or smarter, but because she'd been given a chance they hadn't received. A warning text at exactly the right moment. An FBI investigation that happened to be underway. A detective who cared enough to intervene. And Emma had chosen to honor that chance by dedicating her life to making sure other women got the same opportunity for escape and survival. As the sun set over Phoenix House that evening, Emma looked at the sign above the door. A phoenix rising from flames, symbolizing rebirth and transformation. She thought about the woman she'd been, Emma Hayes, the trusting wife. She thought about the woman she'd pretended to be, Victoria Mason, the calculated infiltrator. And she thought about the woman she'd become, Emma Victoria Hayes, the survivor who refused to stay silent. The phone rang again. Another woman in crisis. Another opportunity to help. Emma answered, her voice warm and reassuring. Phoenix House, this is Emma. Tell me what's happening, and let's figure out how to keep you safe. Because that's what survivors did. They survived, and then they reached back to pull others out of the darkness. They transformed pain into purpose. They refused to let their trauma define them or destroy them. They rose from the ashes again and again and again, as many times as it took. Marcus had tried to push Emma out of existence. Instead, he'd pushed her into becoming someone far more powerful than she'd ever been as his wife. And that, Emma thought as she listened to another woman's story of fear and survival, was the sweetest revenge of all.